All right. Good morning. Like Robin Williams used to say, good morning, Vietnam. I like Robin Williams, pretty funny. But anyway, this morning I'm going to talk about basically dinosaurs and fossils. I think it's an interesting topic coming from a creationist point of view. And I hope this helps. I hope this helps everyone, especially if you're a person of faith, and that you'll enjoy the information. Is there any type of information that confirms, say that, again, there are dinosaurs and that they were created? And I think there's plenty of information, and we're going to get into that here in a minute. But as I do in most of my videos where I talk about, basically I'm trying to get you to believe in God, obviously. That's my goal. I'm a Christian, so I'm going to tell you where I'm coming from. But I'm going to use scientific data, not my opinion. And most of the data I'm going to give you is from videos and stuff like that, or from people that you would consider hostile to religious thought and practice, because if I do that, then you can't claim a religious bias. Now, there are a couple of videos in here, I admit, that kind of break my rule, only because they're the only ones talking about certain parts of the information that's out there and available, and the only reason why they're the only ones talking about it is because the evolutionists won't touch it with a 10-foot pole. But if you're a Christian, let it be known that I'm not arguing the science. I don't argue the science. I take the science that they have, and I might draw a different conclusion than they will. I'm not saying that, but I don't argue the science, because that's one of the things that I try not to do. But I think you can use their science and say that God exists. I'm not saying I don't believe in the science. I'm not saying I do. I'm just using what man has collected and simply arguing that God exists from that. And again, today we're going to talk about fossils and dinosaurs. So here's a clip from Jurassic Park. Let's watch this.
Well, let me show you. First, I'll need a drop of blood. Your blood.
Right. Oh, John, that hurt. Relax, John. It's all part of the miracle of cloning. Hello, John.
Hello, John. Hello? Hello, John.
From what?
Hello?
Flow extraction has never recreated an intact DNA strand.
Not without master sequence gaps.
Good afternoon,
Your
John.
DNA from what source? Where do you get 100-million-year-old dinosaur blood?
Shh. What? What? Oh, Mr. DNA, where did you come from?
From your blood. Just one drop of your blood contains billions of strands of DNA, the building blocks of life. A DNA strand, like me, is a blueprint for building a living thing.
Okay,
And
remember that. It's a
sometimes
blueprint.
Animals that went extinct millions of years ago, like dinosaurs, left their blueprints behind for us to find. We just had to know where to look. Bingo. Dino DNA. A full DNA strand contains 3 billion genetic codes. If we looked at screens like these once a second for 8 hours a day, it'd take 2 years to look at the entire DNA strand.
So there you go.
It's that long.
It's that long.
So,
All right. So Bill Gates said that DNA is the most sophisticated software program in the known universe. Software program. It's also it's an instruction manual on how to build a body. It's also a software program on how it operates. It's got what they call specified complexity to it. There's different types of information. There's one called Shannon information and one called specified complex. Well, this is specified complex information that's in a specific order. In fact, they say that the DNA strand is one long letter. So if you were to jumble even a portion of it, you wouldn't have anything resembling the instruction manual that you would need to build a dinosaur. Now, to say that much information came about by, quote, chance, random selection, or random mutation, natural selection, is just basically ludicrous. It really is. And it would take you, 2 years to read through it, just by say 8 hours a day for 2 years to read through it. That's how large it is. And you're saying that can come about by those evolutionary mechanisms? Sorry, if you believe in that, you believe in miracles. But let's continue here. All right, so we're going to cover four main areas: fossils, of course. First, the fossil record. Then we are going to cover what the Bible has to say about dinosaurs. In other words, does the Bible talk about dinosaurs? I'm not using to prove that God exists, but I'm saying that if in the Bible itself it speaks about dinosaur creatures, and the scientists say today that dinosaurs died off 65 million years ago, well, how would anybody in the Bible know what they look like? Okay, and then also, what do modern scientists say happened to the dinosaurs and when? And is there any evidence in the past? And I'm talking about the near past, when, I'm talking 5, 10, 15,000 years ago, in the sense that before, say, the early 1800s, where they knew or found dinosaur bones, and they started putting them in museums and all that kind of stuff. So that's what I would consider the past. And so did anybody earlier than, say, first part of the 18th century, did they see dinosaurs? Did they claim to see dinosaurs? Is there any evidence that they saw dinosaurs? And then the very best one is the last one, the new discoveries that can shed light on the subject, like really, how old are dinosaurs really? Anyway, let's cover some definitions first. We must define our terms, and so we can define our terms and keep it straight, so we're not changing. But here's what a fossil is, and this is the definition. I got it right off the internet. The remains or impressions of a prehistoric organism preserved in petrified form. Okay, so it's in petrified form. Well, what does it mean to be petrified? Changed into a stony substance, so they're ossified. So, which means there's no biological material left. And we're going to see a little video here from Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he's going to define exactly what a fossil is. Now, again, let me say this: Neil deGrasse Tyson, and no denigration to him. He's not a big believer in God or the Christian faith, and again, that's okay. That's why I use his videos. So again, no disrespect to Neil deGrasse Tyson, but let him tell you. Again, we're defining our terms here, what fossils are. Okay. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Neil deGrasse Tyson, your host for Nova Science Now. Most of what we know about ancient life, and I'm talking millions of years old, comes from these things. Fossils. They're actually rocks. Over time, the bone and tissue has been replaced by minerals. But there's only so much you can learn from a rock.
Okay, so they're supposed to be
Think
rocks.
about how much more you could learn if, instead of a rock, what you found was the real thing. Peter Standring met some researchers who've uncovered some rare remains.
All right, so fossils are millions of years old. They normally say something to the effect that sometimes it takes pressure and heat and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, they're millions of years old. Fossils are rocks, no biological material left, no bone, no tissue. And but this is interesting, some of his colleagues have made a rare find. Now, I'd like to know what he would consider rare, but we'll see later on in the video. His definition of rare and my definition of rare are two different things. But again, keep it in mind. Not only are fossils rare, but new kinds of discoveries are rare that they found. That's the important thing to keep in mind. Now, here's a depiction of what you'd find in a museum describing how fossils are created. Fish dies, sinks to the bottom, fish rots. All that's left is the bones, and they get covered by mud. And then over time, the bone is replaced by mineral. And that's how they say all fossils are formed. Okay. Now, this is what we call the geologic column, and I would consider the geologic column, quote, the Geologist Bible. And if you look at the chart, you see 1 1/2 at the top, 65, 140, 210. Well, those are millions of years, and notice man's not even on the chart. Okay, so they say that modern man is about 200,000 years old, and then, before that we were Neanderthals, and et cetera, et cetera. But that's why they're not even depicted on the chart. But the one I want you to concentrate on is the very last one, or at least not the Precambrian layer, which is the last one below 570, but the Cambrian layer. Now, In the Cambrian layer, there's a thing called an index fossil. That means what? Well, it means this. How do I know how old a layer is? How do I know what layer I'm in? Well, if I find a trilobite, then you can pretty much well bet that you're at the Cambrian layer, because that's when trilobites lived. So if you find a trilobite, then you've found the Cambrian layer, and you can date any fossils you find in there by this index fossil. And that's how they do it. Okay. So, but below the Precambrian, they all admit that fossils are rare. In fact, there's a theory out there called the Cambrian explosion. Again, I don't have time to go into it. I've done another video on it. I just want you to keep in mind about the trilobite. Now, I have a little video here that basically destroys the geologic column. Right off the bat, destroys the geologic column. So watch this. Oops, sorry.
Anyway, archaeology is one of my favorite topics on this channel because, well, that's how we're able to get a glimpse of our past. I mean, if you think about it, it's kind of crazy because so far, according to scientists, the way it goes is that modern humans have been around for about 200,000 years. Now, before that, we were Neanderthals. And then going back 4 million years, and we were basically a bunch of apes. Then going all the way back over 2 billion years ago, we were just cells with a nucleus. But throughout history, again and again, new clues seem to emerge that tells a different story. And it seems like if we want to know more about that, all we have to do is follow the footprints, literally. Because in the summer of 1968, an amateur fossil collector, William J. Meister, made the discovery of a lifetime 43 miles west of Delta, Utah. To his surprise, he found a fossilized human footprint. But what's even more strange is that, well, it's not just a footprint. It was a shoe print, a modern shoe print with a heel about the size of a US 13 shoe. Now, finding a shoe fossil, okay, that's not all that uncommon because, well, our ancestors had shoes, but this particular fossil is that of the shoe stepping on a trilobite. And if you don't know, trilobites were small
stepping on a trilobite.
And they're related
couple
to
of them
crabs
actually.
And shrimps. And what makes this incredibly important is that, well, trilobites only existed between 260 to 600 million years ago. Now that goes against a lot of textbooks because currently researchers believe humans emerged 1 million or 2 million years ago and really only began wearing shoes a few thousand years ago. Now, as one might expect, this sent shockwaves to the scientific communities with excitement for a new paradigm shift as well as skeptical denial. Now, after discovering the fossil, Meister took the rock to Melvin Cook, a professor of metallurgy at the University of Utah, who suggested he show it to the university's geologists. But according to reports, none of the geologists were willing to examine it. So Meister took it to a local newspaper called the Desert News, and the news of his finding quickly spread around the country. The fossil was presented on March 1st, 1973 in a creation-evolution debate at California State University.
Okay, I'm running out of time, but
team included
so they took it in and they actually had it analyzed. That video would tell you they had it analyzed by 3 different labs, and it's proven to be genuine. So, but none of the geologists were willing to look at it. So Occam's razor, I use this a lot. Occam's razor, which is more likely. So if in the previous video depicts a modern human shoe print, by the way, stepping on a trilobite, which means it couldn't have been done by, quote, a Neanderthal. Okay, they didn't walk around in shoes. But anyway, the human shoe print and the trilobite together destroys a geologic column. They're not supposed to have mixed 500 million years ago. And it's proof. I mean, it's right there for anybody to see. And I'm surprised I've never heard of this before. And it was found in what do you say, 1969, I believe? Okay. Anyway. Okay, now here's another example. Here's basically a modern boot, and you have a limestone fossil of a human leg and foot in this particular boot. Now, here's the backstory to it, and let's just cut to the chase. It was found in 1980, but it was made. The boot was made in early 1950s. So somewhere between 1950s and 1980 is when the particular fossil was created. So it didn't obviously take, quote, millions of years for it to occur. Here's another fossil. It basically, this is kind of an interesting story. in 1630. It's been an attraction since 1630 over there in England. And it's interesting that you can take artifacts, hang them underneath this rock ledge where, mineral water and stuff is dripping down on them. And then the small teddy bear will be coated with a rock layer. And here they say in 3 to 5 months. Okay, and here's another example of that as well. This is in the Czech Republic, and this bear took about 2 weeks to form in the rock deposit. In the rock deposit. So hey, now here's an interesting one. This is from Australia, and what you're looking at is an actual water wheel. So the water was coming off the planks there, dripping down onto the water wheel itself, and in 65 years, just 65 years, the whole thing's encrusted in rock. So it doesn't seem like it takes too long for something to be petrified and or turned into rock and or covered with rock or fossilized. But anyway, here's another one they found in 2003. This is a picture of a fishing reel in a rock. Fishing reel embedded in rock. Well, how did a modern day fishing reel get embedded in rock? Go figure. Modern examples, and of course the geology experts can't explain it. Now here's a very interesting one. Now this is definitely a geologic column killer, if you will. Okay, of course the average spiel is that it takes millions, thousands, hundreds of thousands, whatever, of years to basically create many, many layers. And as you can see the strata laid out here. And what is that? Well, that's the trunk of a tree. And personally, I had a house where I had 3 trees on one side that I cut down. I kept the stumps in the ground because I didn't have any way of pulling them out. It would have been a lot more work. But so I left about 3 feet of stump in the ground. Anyway, it wasn't until 3 or 4 years later at that they rotted enough to where I could just push them over and get them out of my yard. I didn't even have to do anything other than that. Just wait until they rotted and they fell over, and I just got rid of them. But evolutionists would have us to believe that that tree that you're looking at would stand there for millions, thousands, at least thousands, if not millions of years, and it would take millions of years to cover the tree trunk. Well, I guarantee you the tree trunk wouldn't have been there 10, 20 years sticking out of the ground without it rotting. So these are called polystrate fossils. Poly meaning many, straight or strata meaning they cross several layers of strata. Which proves what? Which proves that those strata were laid down relatively quickly, within a few years. They couldn't have taken millions of years, or the tree stump would have rotted away. Here's other examples of polystrate fossils, and you can see on one of them the guy's head, so you can kind of get an idea about how big he is. And then look how many feet of strata was laid down, and you can see the different. They're showing the different strata layers that were included. And again, that strata there had to be laid down relatively quickly. It couldn't have taken millions of years to lay it down. Now, this is one that is very interesting because these are spines, delicate spines, and again, they traverse several layers of strata. Well, delicate spines wouldn't lay there, or lay upright, I guess you might say, for millions of years or thousands of years waiting for the mud to cover them. Just wouldn't do it. They had to be quickly buried. So again, polystrate fossils, and they're not just trees. It's proof that those layers were laid down quickly. And with the detail you can see in the spines, the detail's the same all the way across. It's not different. It's all the way across. The detail's the same. So here's a drawing. Of course, it was done in 1897 when they didn't have photographs. They didn't have photographs at the time. And so here's a drawing that they did about other polystrate fossils. And you can see that it's tree trunks crossing many, many layers of strata. Again, the layers had to be laid down relatively quickly. It couldn't have taken thousands of years, millions of years to do it. Now, here's an exhibit they had at Yellowstone. This particular exhibit that you're looking at is no longer there, and we're going to get into reasons why it's no longer there. I'm going to show you a little video in a minute, but the main idea when that particular information was there was the stumps still stand upright in the same sites where they grew millions of years ago. Well, we're going to find out in a minute that that's not necessarily true. So watch this.
We're at Petrified Tree in Yellowstone National Park. Hi, my name is Bob Enyart with Real Science Radio. A couple decades ago, there was an exhibit here that said that this and other petrified trees had grown in situ in this location on various strata, and it happened dozens of times over. Well, 1980, when Mount St. Helens blew, then a geologist, Dr. Stephen Austin, doing research there on Spirit Lake, found that trees that were destroyed in a catastrophe were floating on the lake, and as they got waterlogged, they would sink vertically. They were upright floaters, and when they hit the bottom of the lake, as sediments continued to pour in and fill up the lake, other trees came down at different layers. And so he realized that that was the model that likely produced the trees here petrified in Yellowstone. Well, in 1995, my wife and I went to Maui and had dinner in the home of the National Park Ranger there at Haleakala. His name is Mark Tanaka Sanders. We discussed the fact that these trees at Yellowstone do not have root systems. The remnants of the petrified trees in dozens of different strata on this general hillside are missing roots. The roots are abruptly broken off 2 to 3 feet from the base of the trees. You can picture this tree did not grow here. It grew elsewhere. It was knocked over in a catastrophe. It was floating with many other trees. It became waterlogged, and because of the rocks that were bound up in the roots of the tree, and for other reasons obviously, the tree began to sink, but it was an upright floater. And it came into the bottom of what was at that time the bottom of a lake. As the sediments continued to settle from that catastrophe, other upright floaters sunk in slightly different layers. Working with Mark Tanaka Sanders, we petitioned the National Park Service to get them to remove that exhibit that misrepresented the origin of these trees. If you notice at the exhibit, there's no mention of upright floaters. There's no mention of a lack of a root system below the petrified trees here.
Of course not.
And that's probably for a reason. If you're interested in...
Okay. So
this area of Mount St. Helens,
hold on, sorry.
north of Mount St. Helens.
This is so we're gonna look at Mount St. Helens. He mentioned Mount St. Helens, the example of Mount St. Helens. Well, in the 1980s, Mount St. Helens, the volcano blew, and there's all kinds of interesting things that happened with Mount St. Helens. One of the things is the petrified trees you just saw. Okay, so if anything else, Mount St. Helens should be a case study for every geologist, every single geologist. Watch this. Okay, watch this.
Was a site of intense geologic activity. Up to 600 feet of strata formed here at this location. 600 feet of strata is hard to believe, but since 1980, since May 18, 1980, up to 600 feet of deposits have formed here, and this area has been eroded since then to show us some of the 600 feet of deposits that have formed here. What is amazing is the minute layering that formed in some of these deposits. We have historic observation and eyewitness reports and photographs of this area repeatedly between the eruptions, showing us the sequence of which these deposits formed. Each layer has a date, and I'm fascinated as I study these layers because each layer represents
Look how high those layers
a
are.
geologic catastrophe.
Amazing.
Formed since 1980. The one that comes to my mind most vividly here is behind us. We see this layered June 12th, 1980 pumice flow deposit. Hurricane velocity surging flows from the crater of Mount St. Helens came surging down right over this area in a matter of hours, deposited 25 feet in thickness of strata and minutely layered strata. I had thought that a volcanic eruption would form a homogenized series of deposits. Boy, was I wrong. Here these flows moving at twice freeway speed through this area deposited this minutely layered deposit. There are mud flow deposits here. There is the 9-hour eruption deposit from the 9-hour eruption on May 18th. There's all kinds of interesting features. This is a wonderland for geologists to study. If you were here watching the June 12th, 1980 pumice flow deposit form, you'd be dead. Okay, it was that hazardous of environment. Nobody actually saw the individual layers form. Underneath this ground-hugging cloud of volcanic ash.
Okay. So, there you have it. I mean, it didn't take millions of years, but I would venture to guess, if nobody was around to see it, and an evolutionist went down there, an evolution geologist went down there, they would say it took millions of years, thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years, something to that effect, for these canyons to form. He said 600 feet. 600 feet. And that's just one volcano. One volcano. So, I've always been fascinated with the Grand Canyon. I've been to the Grand Canyon. I've hiked down to the Grand Canyon and back out. It's huge. Okay, so you'd have to ask yourself, well, what could cause the Grand Canyon to be formed? Well, here's the, and this is from a very recent video. Again, it's not a Christian video, but it's a very recent video that talks about the Grand Canyon. Hold on, let me watch this.
By 10 million years ago, Earth is morphing into a world most of us would recognize. The Colorado River is carving out the Grand Canyon.
The Colorado River is carving out the Grand Canyon. Well, one thing I forgot to mention in the Mount St. Helens video, it was the canyon, the formation of the canyon, that created the river in the bottom, not the other way around. They're saying the Colorado River, and they're in this video, they're talking about it, millions. So it was 10 million years ago. They estimated it took like 4 to 5 million years to carve the Grand Canyon. Okay, well, is that true? Does it have to be true? Well, if you look at Mount St. Helens, they call Mount St. Helens as a small Grand Canyon, and it was one volcano. Well, okay, so is there any evidence that something else in past history could have basically carved the Grand Canyon? So let's talk about that here in a minute. Okay, so modern proof that the Grand Canyon could have been formed by, let's say, a story that is spoken of in all ancient histories, Sumerian culture, Babylonian culture, not just Judeo-Christian culture. They all talk about a Noah's flood. Okay, so let's watch this video, and what in this one the geologist is going to talk about fossils. Pretty cool stuff. Watch.
Geologists learn to visualize the way that this place looked in the past. Knowing how to read the texture of the rock, the kind of rock it is, the fossils that are in it, geologists can, it's like a detective story. You can uncover what this place looked like billions of years ago.
This is now desert country, more than 300 miles inland.
300 miles inland, more.
And yet, these shells, encased in solid rocks, are ocean fossils.
Ocean fossils.
In this one cliff, you can find fossil shells that look like you'd pick up on the seashore today. They die, they fall to the bottom of the seafloor, and they get trapped and die in the mud at the bottom of the ocean at the time that they're being deposited.
Shells like these come from shallow tropical waters, an inland sea that first arrived here 500 million years ago and covered the flat, low-lying plain. Ancient fossils of sea animals tell geologists that this land was once under the waves of an inland ocean. But that leads to yet another mystery. The investigation needs to figure out why these undersea rocks are now high in the air, thousands of feet above sea level.
It's surprising to go up a mile above sea level and you find a clamshell, or what looks like a clamshell, and you say, that's what I see when I go down to the ocean. So why is it here a mile above sea level?
So why is it? I mean,
Geologists
seriously, hold on.
learn to
Oh, stop.
visualize
I already did that one.
how to
Stop.
read.
Sorry. A mile above sea level. Okay, well, what could cause that? Well, let's see. How about a worldwide flood spoken of in Scripture, where it talks about the water covering from the ocean covering the whole earth for a while? That would put sea creatures, sea fossils, those kinds of things, and it could like, again, we're talking Mount St. Helens was one volcano, right? One volcano. Well, watch this next video, and they say that there were 100 volcanoes that formed the Grand Canyon. So watch this.
This is a rare look at one of the most remote and secret parts of the Grand Canyon. A series of small cone-shaped mountains line the canyon's edge. And there are flows of black rock running down from each rim.
Okay, I'm going to skip ahead because I want to get to the part where they tell you how many volcanoes.
You know, it would immediately create just giant clouds of steam.
The extensive lava flows, erupting from as many as 100 cinder cone volcanoes.
100 cinder cone volcanoes help create the volcano. I'd let us watch more of the video, and I'm not trying to. I'm just, the only reason why I have to is because I don't want to get in trouble with YouTube, copyright stuff. I can't use too much. I'm going to run out of time. Is what my problem is. So forgive me. But I hit the point where I wanted to say it. It was 100 cinder cone volcanoes that helped form the Grand Canyon. So now we have two facts. We have sea fossils a mile high, and throughout all the layers. And again, if you remember the Mount St. Helens one, look how many layers of strata were formed, okay, over a relatively short period of time, all right? Then you have 100 volcanoes. That's another thing. Now, again, we're going to talk about the layers of sediment. We're going to look at that real quick. And again, think of Mount St. Helens.
But that did not happen just once. Many different layers in the walls of the Grand Canyon tell Karlstrom that over hundreds of millions of years,
again, hundreds of millions of years,
has been submerged by the sea, not just once, but at least 8 times.
Okay, so they're saying their theory is, of course, the sea, they was under the sea, so it was basically a local sea flood, you might say, 8 different times. They was buried under the sea 8 different times. Well, first of all, that does away with the geologic column altogether, first of all. But anyway, what else could explain it? Well, how about Noah's flood? How about that? Now, this is what they call a modern theory. They call it the spillover theory, and it was proposed in 2000. Well, I'll get to it, but this is not a new theory, but it is the accepted theory of today. That's why I'm bringing it up. It is the accepted theory of today, and I want you to see that. Now watch this. Okay, well, before I get to it, this is the reason why they had to come up with this theory is, first of all, if you know anything about the Grand Canyon, if you look at the diagram there, you can see over to the right, over to the very right, the Colorado River enters the Grand Canyon at 2,800 feet. But the canyon itself has to cut through an elevation of 6,900 to 8,500 feet. And it flows downhill for 270 miles. Well, again, water doesn't flow uphill, so truthfully, it would be impossible for the Colorado River to cut its way through the canyon. It's almost like the Mount St. Helens. The canyon formed the river, not the other way around. But what would you need in order to cut? What would you need in order to cut across that delta, where the Grand Canyon resides? That's the question. Okay, watch this.
The question scientists now had to answer was what happened at that time to cause the river to dig deep and carve out the canyon. It is a debate that has been going on for more than a century, and which continues today.
I got interested in the Grand Canyon when I went to school and started studying, and I heard about the different ideas associated with the Grand Canyon and was just blown away when I found out we did not understand how the Grand Canyon formed. Something as iconic as the Grand Canyon wasn't understood, just seemed crazy to me, and so basically decided to dedicate a large portion of my life to trying to figure it out.
One theory is that several ancient rivers merged, and their combined cutting power started digging out the canyon. Another assumes that the river cut down into the plateau as the land uplifted around it. But John Douglas has his own theory, one that has gained respect among many leading geologists since he first published his ideas in 2000. What Douglas calls his spillover theory seems to work well on paper.
Spillover is incredibly easy. All it means is the Colorado River poured into a basin. When it poured into that basin, it had to form a lake. And this lake was huge. All that lake had to do was rise and then spill across the plateau. It poured down, cutting rapidly.
There you go.
Over time,
and look at it from
ended
space.
up with the beginnings of Grand Canyon very quickly.
At his college campus in Phoenix, Douglas is building a scale model experiment to see if his spillover theory actually works in real life. He sculpts tons of dirt into a model of the Colorado Plateau. Running faucets represent the flow of the Colorado River into the ancient lake.
Now we have our large lake. The water's getting higher, it's getting ready to spill across. We have a tiny little trickle of water pouring down off the lake. That little tiny trickle of water doesn't seem like much, but over time, that little bit of water flowing down that steep slope is going to gain energy. It's going to start cutting, making waterfalls that work their way back.
Noah's flood, anybody?
One waterfall has now reached the lake. You can see
so you
that
can get
we've
enough
just
water.
released a significant amount
go up
of water, much more
4,000
water than
feet.
was previously pouring down. Now we have huge canyon cutting. Landslides are sloughing off the side of the canyon walls, the water flushing it downstream. The lake, you can see that it's starting to shrink in size. That lake is getting lower. And right there, you can see that we have cut our own small-scale version of the Grand Canyon.
There you go, right there. And that's exactly what this is from Kent Hovind. He proposed this, I think it was like 1996 or even, maybe even earlier. He had these diagrams that I got off his website, and he already proposed that. It's not a 2000 proposal. Of course, they're giving it to that guy. I don't care. I'm not worried about it or anything. But hey, this is how the Grand Canyon was formed. And if you look at the diagram on the right and you look at the canyon, okay, we're looking at it from space. If you had all that water going through there, hello, a flood, it wouldn't take that long to carve that stuff out of there. It just wouldn't. It looks big from our perspective, I understand that, but we're talking about a worldwide flood. I'm just saying, you've got fossils at the top, check. Worldwide flood would put fossils at the top and all the way through the layers. And a flood and all that volcanic activity, the Bible says that the fountains of the deep were open. Well, how were the fountains of the deep open? Called volcanic activity. You know, you warm up the Earth's surface and all the water inside the Earth could come out. And I have a video on that. I don't think it's in here, but talking about there's probably 2 to 3 times more water inside the mantle of the Earth than there is on the top of the Earth. Well, how do you get that water out? Well, if you heat up the center of the Earth, there you go. And that's what it said. The fountains of the deep were broke open, and it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. You had a huge amount of water. Sorry about that. Got a phone call. I'll probably cut it out. But anyway, I don't know where I left off, so I'm going to have to... Just looking at this, though, scientists today believe in what they call the spillover theory. Again, if you look at the diagram there on the screen, you look at the right one, and you look at the, you might say, satellite photo of the Grand Canyon. You know, from Earth, standing down on the ground, it looks pretty big. But from Earth, as a feature of the Earth, it's relatively, it is big, but it's not relative to those 2 lakes. And again, if you think of a worldwide flood, if those 2 lakes were there when the worldwide flood occurred, So it wouldn't take much longer, much more, to cause them to spill over. And then you've got the fountains of the deep breaking open. You've got 40 days and 40 nights of rain. Oh my goodness. We're talking, there's enough water there. More than enough water to dig out that canyon. Plus, again, the 100 volcanoes that go off, etc., etc. And yes, I do realize, even in the other video, they give different time periods for all this stuff. But if you look at Mount St. Helens, and it created a Grand Canyon-like canyon in a very, very short period of time, a worldwide flood could do the same. And it does explain why there's sea fossils a mile high. Sea fossils a mile high. Okay? Oh. Come on. All right. Now, this is just another diagram that he had talking about it. Grand Canyon Explained by Kent Hovind. If you want, you can stop and stop the video and read his little explanation here. It's kind of funny. It is kind of funny. And he is, when he's talking about it, he's talking about the two red lines there. You can see the ridge line where the snow is. So, in other words, the ground there is higher because of the ridge line. And anyway, and he talks about, see, those two ridge lines indicate what is called the snow line. Okay, between those two red lines is a ridge that gets about 6,900 to 8,500 feet, which is 2,100 to 2,600 meters above sea level. Oops. Oh, gosh. Okay, anyway. If you want to stop it, you can read it. It's kind of funny. So here's another example of the ability of water to create a very small canyon, yes, but in a very short time. And here we're talking about only 30 inches of water in 1 week. Okay, and it carved a canyon a mile long, 50 feet, 15 meters deep, and hundreds of yards through solid limestone rock. So could water do that? Well, it did it here in Texas. So the Guadalupe River carved Canyon Lake in just 24 hours on July 24, 2002. 1 mile long, over 50 feet deep, and hundreds of yards wide through solid limestone rock. And here we're talking only 30 inches of water, of rain in 1 weekend. Again, worldwide flood, rains 40 days and 40 nights, fountains of the deep are open, you've got volcanic activity, you've got everything, and yes, the Grand Canyon could be formed. So, conclusions. Does it take millions of years to make a fossil? Well, doesn't seem to. It doesn't have to. Polystrate fossils, they're very good proof that the deposits have to be deposited relatively quickly. And we're talking, 60, 70, 80 feet or better of deposits in a relatively short period of time. All right. Strata. Does it take millions of years to lay down strata? Again, looking at the Mount St. Helens volcano today from 1980. No, it does not. Okay. What is more likely is a catastrophe happened. And again, there's an event in the Bible talked about it, and in all ancient cultures, it's called the flood. Now, why even scientists, geologists, and all those kind just dismiss all that, don't look at the history is beyond me. But now, what does the Bible say about dinosaurs? Okay, well, if you go to Job chapter 40, verses 15 to 24, you read about a creature. Behold now Behemoth, which I made with thee. He eateth grass like an ox. Lo, now his strength is in his loins, and his force is in the navel of his belly. He moveth his tail like a cedar. And what we're talking about is the cedars of Lebanon, which are 30, 40, 50 feet, 80 feet tall. We're not talking, 2 feet. A cedar tree in Lebanon is very tall. His bones are as strong as pieces of brass. His bones are like bars of iron. He is the chief of the ways of God. He that made him can make his sword to approach unto him, etc. So, but here we have a creature that has a tail like a cedar tree. And again, look it up. You can look it up. See how big the cedar trees in Lebanon grow. Because that's the area in which we're talking about here. Okay. Now, here's another aspect of this particular creature. He can drink up a river. He drinketh up a river. He can draw up a whole river into his mouth. It's a pretty big mouth if you can do that. Pretty big creature. Okay? Now, the even the Bible commentators use this creature right here and say that's what it is. And, well, let me see. Does that look like the tail of a cedar tree? I don't think so. And here is the other creature that they use, the elephant. Again, does that look like the tail of a cedar tree? Again, I don't think so. Now, how about that? How about a sauropod dinosaur like that? How about that dinosaur right there? A brontosaurus. Brontosaurus rex. Does that have a tail like a cedar tree? I think so. Bones are like bars like iron, etc., etc. Could it? Anyway. So, that's what the Bible has to say about it. But what do modern scientists say happened to the dinosaurs and when? Well, okay. Man has a theory that all the dinosaurs lived before man walked the planet. Again, we looked at the geologic column. They put the Jurassic dinosaurs, like 150 million years ago. But man, modern man, again, most of them say about 200,000 years, have only been around since 200,000 years. But the dinosaurs, well, let's see what they say. This is what modern science says happened to the dinosaurs.
But when a 6-mile-wide asteroid struck the Yucatan Peninsula 65 million years ago, dinosaurs
65 million years ago.
And the resulting global cataclysm of earthquakes, firestorms, and tsunamis ultimately led to their extinction.
Okay.
Some animals, however, managed to survive. But how? Since its discovery in 1978, investigations of the asteroid's impact crater include data from seismic...
All right. Well, anyway, so that's the idea. It's called the meteorite impact theory. So basically 65 million years ago, the asteroid hit the planet and basically wiped out all the dinosaurs. Okay. Now, if this video is correct, just pure logic, if this video is correct, would civilizations that are not modern ones, but, they're 5, 10, 15,000 years ago, would they know what modern dinosaurs look like? Would they? Okay. Now, again, based on the ideas that we've come up with, they started unearthing dinosaur bones basically like in the 1820s. So if you've never saw a dinosaur, they died 65 million years ago. Is there any evidence from past history that dinosaurs existed with man? Any evidence at all? Well, we already looked at one. We looked at the modern shoe print standing on a trilobite, but we're not. That's a trilobite, though. We're not talking about dinosaurs. We're talking about dinosaurs now. Is there any evidence from the past history that dinosaurs existed with man? Well, let's see. Okay, this is a Civil War photo, and the two gentlemen at the bottom are considered experts in the field, I guess. And they are the ones that have, studied the photograph, and it's considered to be a valid photograph, and it's a Civil War photo. And here's a better picture of it, more close up. And that's a, pterodactyl? Pretty big bird. And that's during the Civil War. Here's another one. This is a Cambodian temple. Now, if a few thousand years ago, 10, 15, who knows, at this Cambodian temple, how would they know if all the dinosaurs died away? How would they know to carve an animal like that with scales and armor and stuff like that on its back? Well, that's a Stegosaurus. Looks pretty good. Pretty good representation of a Stegosaurus. All right, and here's some Egyptian artifacts. And here's another one from Egypt. Basically the same thing. Well, that's some kind of sauropod dinosaur. And this one, look at that. Now, in my opinion, of course, if you look at it closely, what are the plumes, you might say, that are around the outside there? They look like fire to me. So here what you have here, this is in India. You've got basically a fire-breathing dragon in India. And here's one, again, looks like a fire-breathing dragon, and in this case, this is from France. Looks, I mean, almost identical to the last one. So, here's another scripture in Job 41. So we were in Job 40 for Behemoth. Now we're in Job 41 for Leviathan. Okay, and there's the description of him. His strong scales are his pride, bound together as with a tight seal. No one is near to another, that no air can come between them. They are joined to one another. They stick together and cannot be separated. In verse 9, behold, his assailants' hope and expectation of defeating Leviathan is false. Will not one be overwhelmed even at the sight of him? So, and then they have this in verse 18. His sneezes flash forth light, and his eyes are like the reddish eyelids of dawn. Out of his mouth go burning torches, and sparks of fire leap out. Behind him he makes a shining wake. One would think the deep to be gray-haired with foam. So, here's a creature described in the Bible. Now, again, if you look at the previous one, look at that creature, especially that one, and the fire coming out of its mouth, and they look the same. And here you have, in the Bible, something described like that. And then here you have figurines. These are from 800 BC to 200 AD. But 800 BC to 200 AD is after the flood. And you have a guy riding on a triceratops. Again, if you didn't see these creatures, how in the world could you make these figurines, quote unquote, for your kids to play with, or whatever it is? How would you know? How would you know that the sauropod dinosaur would have scales on its back like it does? Here's a photograph from Kuwait, and there's a sauropod dinosaur amongst the other animals that are listed there. Here's a jar from Bolivia called Dueling Dinosaurs. Here's another petroglyph from the Americas, Native American in Canada. A sauropod dinosaur with armor on its back. These are the Inca stones of Peru. Now, there's some controversy over these. If you go to Wikipedia, they say this is a hoax. Okay, so and here you have let's see, a triceratops. I can see a long-necked sauropod. I can see a T-Rex, and here you have a T-Rex holding a man. Now, wait a minute. Here's a T-Rex holding a man. Okay. Interesting. Again, if dinosaurs died millions of years ago, 64 million years ago, how would they know to carve these things? Again, I realize Wikipedia says it's a hoax, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Now, so here's the story from Wikipedia. Inca stones are a collection of andesite stones. There was a farmer that you can see his name there, but first he would sell these things to this guy, the Javier Cabrera. Okay, and at first he claimed that he found them, but then later he admitted to creating the carvings he had sold. So that's the story. If you read it on Wikipedia, that's the story you get. Okay, now, so let's watch a clip. Here's a clip from the History Channel on this very subject.
Ica, Peru. Here, in 1961, workers in the Okukahe Desert unearthed a collection of carved andesite stones, many depicting what appear to be human encounters with dinosaurs. And since then, approximately 50,000 of these mysterious stones have been found across the region.
I have photographed some 100 of it in a collection in the city of Ica. And there was an old Professor Dr. Cabrera. The Indians brought him stones from all over the country of Peru. And on these stones you see fantastic engravings.
Peruvian physician Javier Cabrera began researching what had become known as the Ica stones in 1966. Ranging in size from small pebbles to large boulders, Dr. Cabrera's museum preserves over 20,000 of the strange rock carvings.
all dinosaurs died about 60 millions of years ago. So normally, no human being should ever have seen a dinosaur. But there are wonderful pictures, engravings on stone where you see humans and dinosaurs together. Sometimes the humans are even riding on the back of the dinosaurs.
What we have here is a Inca burial stone, which is very unique. And what it depicts is that man and dinosaurs live contemporaneously. We see the various Triceratops, Brachiosaurus, and T-Rex, those type of creatures. So these Incas had to either see them or they knew a lot more about the dinosaurs because they drew them precisely.
Right.
Although many ancient astronaut theorists believe the stones date from the 5th century BC to the early 13th century AD, there are those in the scientific community who remain skeptical about their origin. But consider this. Just the enormous number of stones would have required that an artist carve more than 1,000 of them a year, every year, for 45 years.
Right. So that's the argument. No way. No way. And they're found all over Peru. So you can't say that one farmer carved all those. Anyway, well, here's a mosaic, a stone mosaic from Ukraine. And again, there's a dinosaur. Again, if they never saw these dinosaurs, how could they draw them so accurately? How could they do that without seeing them? Now, here's some, this is man's footprints with dinosaur footprints. And there's all kinds of these all over the place. This isn't just the only one. So we have examples of this all over. Here's Paluxy River. This is in Texas. Dinosaurs and man's footprints together. Okay? And here's a very good one. I think it's part of the Paluxy find, but it's a human footprint with the dino footprint. You can see that the dino footprint has stepped over the human footprint, not the other way around. So you have a dinosaur footprint stepping on the human footprint. And here's the background for it. And one of a human footprint is belonging to the dinosaur. So the significance of the cement hard fossil is that it shows the dinosaur print partially over and intersecting the human print. And again, there's the other stuff about it. So here's the history of it. In July 2000 is where they found it, both of Stephenville, Texas. So the fossil was transported to a professional laboratory where 800 x-rays were performed. Laboratory technicians verified compression and distribution features clearly seen in both prints, human and dinosaur. This removes any possibility that the prints were fake. Now here's another one. And this has an interesting video I'm going to show you in a minute. Now the person that does the video is not a creationist, is not a believer in God. And so what's interesting about this is the people that find these, they keep the, you might say, long dates. And I expect that. They always do that. It never dawns on the evolutionists, quote, the evolutionist to perhaps, maybe change his dates. But watch this video.
There was a recent discovery not too long ago of some human footprint fossils that have been dated to be 290 million years old. Paleontologist Jerry McDonald found tons of fossilized tracks in 1987, mainly from birds and animals. But one track he found turned the world upside down. He found a 290 million year old human footprint fossil. This ancient human footprint is older than animals, birds, and even dinosaurs. Now it's a 100% fact that this is a real fossil.
Okay, so it's a 100% fact it's a real fossil, but why does he say it's 290 million years old? Because of the geologic column, that's why. That's why he says that, because of the geologic column. Well, what if the geologic column doesn't exist? And again, that's one of the first fossils I showed you. You hear a modern shoe print standing on a trilobite. There's no such thing as a geologic column. If in the Grand Canyon video, when they said that there was the layers, how they were laid down by 4 different or 8 different times that the sea came in, that particular part of the world was underwater 8 different times. Okay, even that would destroy the geologic column. The geologic column has nothing to do with being worldwide then, because that's supposedly a local thing that happened in that part of the world. It's just crazy to think of the geologic column, but that's their Bible, and that's why they stick to the long periods of time. And you'll see that more as we go along, because again, 90% of these videos are from evolutionists, and no matter what evidence you present them, they're going to stick with the millions and millions and millions of years. Okay, so here, famous ancient people who reported seeing dinosaurs. So this is 330 BC. You have Alexander the Great. I think everybody knows a little bit about Alexander the Great. It was reported to measure 70 cubits. He saw an animal measured 70 cubits. And depending on your size of a cubit, anywhere from 18 to 25 inches per cubit, you know, that would make the animal about 100 feet. And its eyes are said to have been the size of a large, round Macedonian shield. Pretty big creature. Here's Herodotus, a Greek historian, and he saw winged serpents, water snakes, wings like a bat. Okay. Here's Marco Polo, and this is in 1271. Saw huge serpents, 10 paces in length. That's about 30 feet. The jaws are wide enough to swallow a man. Huge. Okay, winged serpents. What would you call that today? They'd probably call it a dragon. And here you have, in Chinese history, my wife is Chinese, and she lived in China and came over. But anyway, she's Chinese, and I asked her about it, and yes, in the Chinese culture, they have festivals. They have all kinds. I've been to China 3 times. I've seen the different statues of both the dragons and their mate, the Thunderbird. Anyway, they have in history, they've had things called royal dragon feeders, and they had copper vessels where they kept them filled with cream to feed the dragons. It's all over Chinese culture, and they believe in the dragons. Okay, here's a guy in 341 BC. He was killed by a dragon. Gulped down, they gulped down the body of Morpheus as a big fish swallows a little one. Huge animal that gulped him down. So, Occam's razor, the simplest explanation tends to be the correct one. Either early man has a very active imagination, and without seeing any dinosaurs that supposedly died off 65 million years ago, he was able to actually, or by accident or chance, recreate representations of dinosaurs. Or the creators of these artifacts and stories actually saw the animals. Which option is more probable? I'll tell you which one I'll pick. There's no way they could know what these things look like unless they saw them. So, this is the best part. If you've stayed with me, this is the best part. Any new discoveries that can shed light on the subject. Okay? Well, the idea was, the theory's been that 65 million years ago they died. And standard science belief, before, I guess, say before the early 2000s, standard science belief was that all biological materials are gone. Like Neil deGrasse Tyson said at the beginning, they've all been changed into rock. No biological material left. No blood vessels, nothing. All you have left is rock. Okay. But as you watch for the video, look for the stated age of the dinosaurs. Now, what if you do find biological material? What should that tell you, first off? If the stated science is that nothing biological could last more than 1 million years, and you find biological material in dinosaur bones, what should you automatically conclude? Let's see.
There's something about dinosaurs that captures the imagination. Giant, mysterious animals that roamed the earth for millions of years, now gone forever. All they've left us are their fossils, the dried out mineral remnants of the creatures they once were, with the organic material that gave them life long gone, or so everyone always thought. That is until B. rex, a 68-million-year-old Tyrannosaurus rex who was dug up and named by a paleontologist from Montana State University, who, as Leslie Stahl discovered, has an unorthodox approach to dinosaurs, which may be changing the whole dino ballgame.
Horner's practice of breaking dinosaur bones apart and sending the insides to Mary Schweitzer has landed the two of them at the center of one of the biggest controversies paleontology has seen in years. It started back in 2000 with a series of coincidences. A member of Jack's team, Bob Harmon, wandered away from a dig site one day to eat lunch and noticed a small piece of bone sticking out of the side of a 50-foot cliff.
I could tell pretty much what it was from where I was sitting, that it was a T-Rex metatarsal.
How was it sticking out? You mean it was the side, here's a cliff, and it was like a little jutting out?
Yep, exactly.
He got a folding chair, and he stacked it on these rocks right there. And you can see that this is on the sheer side hill of a cliff.
This is not possible.
No,
Is he attached to anything?
No, he's not. That's Bob.
Jack named the T-Rex B-Rex in Bob's honor.
Okay, so they
and
found
made
this bone.
bones
I'm
was
trying to-
too heavy.
Okay,
the chopper
so
couldn't
they're trying
get
to
it off
get
the
it to,
ground. So after
Mary
all,
Schweitzer.
was
So they
definitely
get these
no
little
Bob.
pieces and
So
send
she
it to
calls
her.
you up and she says...
Calls up and says, we have medullary bone.
Oh, now this had to be thrilling.
Yes, very exciting. And that wasn't all.
What happened next happened by mistake. Mary put some fragments of the bone in acid to dissolve away the outermost layer of mineral. But the acid worked too fast, and all the mineral dissolved away. Being a fossil, there should have been nothing left. But there was. And it was elastic, like living tissue.
This is the piece.
Biological material.
No. She showed us video she took under the microscope.
That's really what happened?
Yes.
That's the dinosaur bone?
Without mineral now. That's what was left.
It looked like the soft tissue she would have expected to find if it had been modern bone. This was impossible. This bone was 68 million years old.
So you see this and you think, what? You say
I didn't want to tell anybody.
Didn't want to
You'd
tell
be
anybody.
ridiculed,
Yes.
right?
And so I said to my technician, okay, do it again. I don't believe it.
And yet, in sample after sample, they were there. Things that looked suspiciously like flexible, transparent blood vessels.
There you go.
She finally mustered the courage to tell Jack.
All right, so I can't play it all because I'll get in trouble with YouTube. And again, I'm not complaining about YouTube. I understand copyright stuff. So that was Mary Schweitzer, and then this is the most recent find. Here we have what they call a 110-year-old nodosaur. Okay, so I'm going to try and skip to those. I've got 2 times up there. I'm going to try and skip to those times just to get to the crux of the argument here. Oh, come on. Darn it. Give me back my... Here. Okay, so about 119. Okay, here's 112. So let's play that. So there it is.
How they radiated and diversified through time. And it doesn't stop there.
The skin is preserved. It's not just the impression of the skin.
Skin is
We
preserved.
actually have some of the original biomolecules preserved.
Okay.
One of the cool things that they tell us for this specimen is that the animal had at least a component of reddish-brown pigment to its skin.
Okay, now here, let's see this
Contents of the
again.
nodosaur's stomach.
Contents
In
of the
addition to
stomach.
having skin preserved all over most of the surface of the animal.
Skin
we
is
also
preserved
have
over most of the
abundant, gut contents. So the last meal of the animal preserved inside. And this is what that stuff looks like. So we're currently doing all sorts of work on this, geochemical work, histological.
Okay, so here we have 2 examples. Now, in the video, I wished I could have showed it. It's there. You can look it up and you can watch it yourself on YouTube. You can watch the 60 Minutes clip on YouTube, and you can watch the Nodosaur clip on YouTube. But they didn't change their time periods. Now they're saying that something that lived 110 million years ago, the Nodosaur, they have gut content still. It has skin preserved over most of its body. Wait a minute. That's the first thing that rots, is the skin. Okay? And I can't help but do this. Now here is the thinking of the geologist. It says, how do you tell how old a fossil is? Well, by the layer strata it is found in. Well, how do you tell how old the layer strata is? By the type of fossil found in the strata. Again, called the index fossil. And the index fossil for the Cambrian layer was the trilobite. Well, that's circular reasoning. Terribly circular reasoning. And here you had, in the first video, the 60 Minutes video, the T-Rex was found up 50 foot high on a 50-foot cliff. So what's a T-Rex doing that high up in the geologic column if they were from the Jurassic period? And they're saying that particular T-Rex was only 64 million years old. But wait a minute. According to them, the T-Rexes lived in the Jurassic period, which is like 150 million years ago. So why did they change the time? Well, because it was found 50 feet up in the cliff. So anyway, and notice also what Mary Schweitzer said. I didn't want to tell anybody. Well, why don't you want to tell anybody? Because it changes the paradigm. If you find biological material, the first thing you should conclude, not the last thing, the very first thing you should conclude is, hey, these dinosaur bones, and they're dinosaur bones, by the way, not dinosaur fossils anymore. They're not dinosaur fossils anymore. They're dinosaur bones, are not 64 million years old. We know, well, I'll get into it. You'll see this in a minute. But so, in the 60 Minutes video, did any of the scientists suggest the possibility that dinosaurs could have lived on the Earth much earlier? No. In fact, they went out of their way. If you watch the whole thing, they're going to go out of their way to make sure everybody understands that these things are still 68 million years old. We're not wrong about the time. I don't know how they could say that because anyway, you'll see in a minute. I've got some other videos. Okay, now what happened was, so there was a big outcry pretty much against Mary Schweitzer and her team for a while. But so her team had to come up with an explanation of how biological materials could last millions of years. Okay, so they came out with this article. This is November 26, 2013. This is very recent, okay? Very recent. So the controversy, you have 68 million year old soft tissue. How? So finally they have a physical explanation of how that could occur. They credit iron in the dinosaur's body for preserving the tissue. Okay? That's what they say. The iron preserves the tissue. And that they're saying that it can, that the biological material can survive millennia. Okay. What we found was unusual because it was still soft and still transparent, yes. Scientists had thought proteins that make up soft tissue would degrade in less than 1 million years. That's right. That was the stated science. That's why they never looked for the biological material, because it was supposed to be gone. There's no reason to spend the money and the time to find biological material that's not going to be there. We know, quote unquote, they said, that it was 65 million years ago. So in the best conditions, in most cases, microbes feast on the dead animal's soft tissue. Hey, skin, how about that? Destroying it within weeks. The tissue was collagen. So researchers also analyzed other fossils for the presence of soft tissue. Oh no, and here we go back to Neil deGrasse Tyson where he said they have a rare find. Again, what would you consider rare? Maybe less than half of 1%? Something really outlandish. But here they said, and Mary Schweitzer and her team, they've been looking for dinosaur bones for years. I mean, they've got a lot. So researchers also analyzed other fossils for the presence of soft tissue and found it was present in about half, 50% of their samples, going back to the Jurassic period. Well, I got news for you. The Jurassic period doesn't exist. The problem is, for 300 years, that's right, 300 years, we thought, well, the organics are all gone, so why should we look for something that's not going to be there? That's right. That's what they believed. That's what they taught. So the obvious question, though, was how soft tissue, pliable tissue, could survive for millions of years. Well, here we go. Iron. Iron is an elemental element present in the abundance in the body, particularly in the blood. Iron is also highly reactive with other molecules. Yeah, it's called a free radical. We'll talk about that in a minute. So the body keeps it locked up tight. It has to. The body has to keep it locked up tight because it's a free radical. It's to prevent it from wreaking havoc on the tissues. That's right. After death, though, iron is set free from the cage. Okay, wait a minute. It's set free from the cage after death. Well, again, logic would tell you if it's set free after death, then it's going to be a free radical and it's going to destroy stuff. But anyway, they're still saying that, no, it's going to act like a formaldehyde. Well, is that possible? Interesting. Occam's razor. The simplest explanation tends to be the correct one. So the article says for 300 years, science has said that all the biological materials are gone. Neil deGrasse Tyson says all fossils are rocks. But today, evolutionists know differently. But they keep sticking to the millions of years mantra story. Why? The history of dinosaur artifacts like cave paintings and pottery proves beyond a reasonable doubt. And it does. The artifacts that I've showed you, the cave paintings that are all around the world, that men, even a few thousand years ago, must have put their eyes on these creatures. And that's a fact. Yes, it could have been before the flood. I don't care. But that's still only a few thousand years ago. That's not millions and billions of years ago. No, it's definitely not 64 million years ago. And finding biological material is proof that the dinosaurs are not even a million years old. Okay, now here's a definition of free radicals. And I'm concentrating on just the free radicals that are produced in the body by natural biological processes. Not the ones that are introduced like tobacco smoke, toxins, or nothing. But free radicals can damage cells, proteins, and DNA by altering their chemical structure. And that's why you take vitamins. You know, we want to repair the damage that free radicals in your body are causing, like if you're smoking tobacco or toxins or pollutants. So it's ludicrous to believe that iron can preserve anything. Okay, now, so the article claims that the iron in the blood acts like a formaldehyde. So I break one of my rules. I'm going to bring in a guy here. His name is Mark Armitage, and he is an expert at the preservation of tissue, an expert in it. And he used to work for a university in California. He went out to the Hell Creek Formation and found a Triceratops horn, and he brought it back and found biological material just like Mary Schweitzer did. He published it just like Mary Schweitzer did. And at first, the university was, like, great. We've got one of our, professors is getting published. Great. And then, lo and behold, 2 weeks later, he's fired because they found out he's a creationist. He didn't publish a creationist paper. He published a scientific paper, just like Mary Schweitzer did, about what he found. And again, he's an expert at tissue preservation. In fact, he teaches scientists. He did anyway. He ran a multi-million-dollar lab and taught them how to preserve tissues. So let's watch a little of what he talks about here.
I'm very excited. I have a critic which I'm going to answer today with this short program on the iron preservation theory. First of all, he claims that I have no independent supporters. He says, I cannot take what Armitage says as fact because he has no independent supporters. Well, surprise, surprise. This is a hot potato in the biological community. This is not something that people want to pursue because it's a career ender. It's a career killer if you go after soft tissue and dinosaur remains. And so my own case is a case in point. The fact that I was running $1 million laboratory at California State University, Northridge, a thriving, booming laboratory if you listen to some of the professors and read their writings from that biology department. And yet 2 weeks after my paper appeared online, I was terminated, given my walking papers out of there. But it's no surprise that I have no independent supporters. In fact, Mary Schweitzer, at the beginning of her work, had no independent supporters. Surprise, surprise. In fact, if you look at the article entitled Mary Schweitzer's Dangerous Idea, I think it was in Discover magazine, she recounts the story where one of the reviewers of her paper wanted to have nothing to do with her paper, her report, and so she asked the reviewer, well, what evidence would you accept? And he said, well, none. This is from the 2004 American Society for Nutritional Sciences Journal of Nutrition, written by Joe McCord, Dr. Joe McCord, and the title is Iron, Free Radicals, and Oxidative Injury. He's talking about cell injury. And here's a quote from the paper. Free iron is a loose cannon chemically. One of the most devastating actions of free redox active iron within the cell is the initiation of lipid peroxidation. It leaves in its wake dysfunctional membranes and cell death. And so there you have a researcher in the field who's studying these lipid membranes in cells and who states clearly that free iron in the body leaves in its wake a trail of destruction and death. So for him to claim that I ignore that iron generates free radicals is really an abject ignorance of what I have said and what's in the literature. Now, he goes on to talk about the fixation process. You're talking about iron nanoparticles. Now, we're talking things that are nanometer sized. In fact, some of these have measured out about 100 nanometers in size, these iron nanoparticles. And according to Schweitzer, they perform the fixation. They cross-link the proteins. Now, again, I mentioned that the molecules that we use in fixatives to fix these proteins are angstrom size.
Which is smaller.
And the reason they are able to fix these proteins is because they can surround the entire protein because they're angstrom sized, and they can fix the tissue by that cross-linking process. And so you're expecting a nanometer size, in fact 100 nanometer sized iron particle to do the same fixation that an angstrom-sized molecule does. It's kind of like using a trash truck to staple your papers together. And so nanometer size, 100 nanometer size iron particles don't do the trick. Now let me make another point about this supposedly fabulous system of iron preservation of tissues. If iron preserved the tissues for 70 million years with the kind of stunning preservation that I'm photographing from these dinosaur soft cells, if iron could perform that, then why isn't it in my protocol manual?
Okay. So he also goes on to talk about Mary Schweitzer
preservation company.
Did
a difficult to find. Now, none of those conditions,
right,
none of those conditions that can be said are indicative or related to what happened at the Hell Creek. When those things were buried at Hell Creek, there were no ultracentrifuges, there was no anticoagulant available, there were no molecular filters, and so just to get to the point where she could begin the experiment, she had to employ all that laboratory technology.
Okay, he's talking about Mary Schweitzer had to do an experiment to, prove her point about the iron preservation, and he's saying that she did something for it lasted for 2 years, and she had to use all these technologies in order for it to work. Anyway, it's just ludicrous. Again, you can find his videos on the internet, but he's an expert at fixation. He was running a multi-million-dollar lab, and they canned him. So the question is, do evolutionists seem to care about following the evidence where it leads? No. Do scientists in general have a bias? You bet they do. Everybody does. Even us. I admit I've got a bias too. I'm not saying I don't, but at least admit it. At least admit it. So what's wrong with Mary Schweitzer's theory of free radical iron acting like a tissue preservative? Well, it's crazy. Watch this.
But it shouldn't. None of it should be there if it's as old as the establishment asserts, because we know that this material, whether it's proteins or other biochemicals like maybe DNA, these proteins should not be there after even 1 million years. So that's the significance, is why do we keep finding proteins and other biochemicals in fossils if they're really that old?
Right.
Problem. Wait a minute, put on the brakes. You can't just brush it aside and pretend like there's no problem. There's an elephant in the room, and it's still in the room, whether or not, you can walk around the elephant, with blinders on, but all we want to do is pull the blinders down, and look, oh, there's an elephant here, and it is original biomaterials still in fossils. And here's the thing. They say, well, we don't have a problem with, we expect this to happen. We expect these materials to still be here. Based on what? Because the science of tissue decay, the science of protein decay, demonstrates, not just illustrates, I'm talking proves in a lab, a repeatable experimental proof type of background that this stuff should not last even 1 million years. That's the elephant in the room. So to ignore the elephant in the room is one way that the human psychology deals with it. But we just want to point out that it's a bad way to deal with it.
Right. So now hold on, I'm gonna pause this for just a second. Here is a radio talk show host, and Jack Horner was the scientist, of course. His team is the one that found the T-Rex. So this radio host is going to talk to Jack Horner. Jack Horner, the Mary Schweitzer thing. But he's going to talk to Jack Horner, and he's going to talk about the T-Rex bone and how he would like to pay to have the T-Rex bone carbon 14 dated. Hold on, okay, so I'm going to skip ahead because I don't want to get, again, it's...
Oh, that's Bob Enyart.
Yeah, let me transfer you over to his office. I think he should be in there right now.
Hello?
Hello, Jack. This is Bob Enyart with KLTT Radio in Denver.
Uh-huh.
How are you doing?
Good.
Jack, I sent a letter to Bob Harmon a few weeks back offering the museum a grant of $8,000 to do a carbon-14 date test of that soft tissue T-Rex you guys dug up. And he said he would forward that to you. And I'm wondering if you saw that or considered it.
Well, carbon-14 doesn't work on something that old.
I understand that.
Assumption number one.
Normally we wouldn't expect to get soft tissue out of a T-Rex skeleton either, but sometimes science proceeds by crossing your T's and dotting your I's. And you guys might have other things you'd like to carbon-14 at the same time. In fact, in the last couple of weeks, I've been able to raise a little more money, so that's up to $10,000 now, that we'd be honored to give you guys if you would consider doing that test.
Well, we can't do that test.
You can't do that?
No.
Do you mean the museum doesn't have the laboratory?
We certainly don't.
Okay, well, we're happy to pay the expense of having a lab do the test in addition to the $10,000 to the museum.
Do you know how carbon-14 works?
Yeah, I'm familiar, and I realize it's useless for anything over maybe 50,000 years or so. But I've done a talk show in Denver for 15 years, and there's a group of folks interested in science. Of course, that discovery caught their attention, and they thought, well, it'd be logical to do this, to just go ahead and do it, even though nobody would be inclined to do it, just like nobody would be inclined to look for soft tissue inside of a T-Rex.
Well, yeah, and, we're still trying to figure out what it is, what it's actually made of.
Right, exactly, whether it's hemoglobin or whatever.
Well,
Jack, is the amount too small that it's just not worth the consideration?
No, that's not it.
Okay. What if I were able to raise more money?
No, the amount of money has nothing to do with it. Because carbon-14 doesn't work on something like this,
right,
your results that you get could be all over the place.
Well, they should be infinity. It should be not datable. In other words, it shouldn't come back saying it's 25,000 years old.
Right.
It should be infinity. And so that'll be a worthwhile...
Well, infinity isn't exactly what you get.
Okay.
Okay, so obviously they're not going to do it. He's not going to allow them to do it. Well, why not? Why won't a scientist allow a carbon-14 date to be done? Okay. It's amazing. It's amazing to me. So why is the previous belief of 1 million years max for biological materials thrown out? Instead of realizing that the dinosaurs in question are not they're not even a million years old. They're not even a million years old. And with the pristine, the pristine amount of biological material in the 60 Minutes, they talked about blood vessels and everything being found. So, what happens to scientists that don't tell the evolutionary fairy tale? Well, a good helping of evolutionary bias, anyone? This is why, I'm serious, this is why I will never believe in evolution, ever. And I almost got thrown off my faith because of this. This is something else. Seems to me that the truth is taking a back seat. And here's a case study of a lady named Greta Keller, and we'll talk about it in a minute. But and now notice this. This is in September of 2018. This is very recent. In fact, when I found this article, it hadn't even come out in the Atlantic yet. I found it the month before it was coming out, but it's called The Nastiest Feud in Science. And in this particular one, this 73-year-old paleontologist came up with a different theory for what killed the dinosaurs. Now, the only difference between the two is they say volcanic eruptions in India killed the dinosaurs, not a meteorite. Okay, not a meteorite. However, both theories are what we call catastrophic theories. That's what killed them. Some type of catastrophe killed the dinosaurs. One says volcanic eruptions. The other one says, of course, the meteorite impact theory. They both put them off millions of years ago. But here, at least in the idea of a catastrophe, it's about an abrupt, instantaneous die-off at virtually the same moment. Keep that in mind. Okay, so the impact theory people, the people that believe in the asteroid deal, they would argue that the hypothesis, their impact theory hypothesis, has reached the level of the evolution hypothesis, which means there's no contest. I mean, evolution is true. There's no way you can not believe in evolution, and, quote, the case is closed. Okay, so the impact theory people think that their theory is so overwhelmingly true that it reaches the level of the evolution hypothesis, and the case is closed. Okay, well, but this Keller lady, it has caused a very rancorous and the longest-running controversy in science. The impactors' case closed confidence has caused vicious infighting, accusations of slander, sabotage, threats, discrimination, spurious data, and attempts to torpedo careers. And one of them says that that Mrs. Keller should even be stoned and burned at the stake for her ideas. So, I ask you, is science without its rancor? Are scientists so open-minded and so even-handed that they would never shove stuff under the rug? No, but here's the other thing as a Christian, okay? Now, notice that each scientist is a believer, okay? And sometimes, again, notice it's a catastrophe, okay? And in the article it talked about, scientists today understand that the dinosaurs died by some type of abrupt and instantaneous die-off virtually at the same moment. Okay, they say it's an asteroid. One says it's an asteroid. The other one says it's a volcano. Well, what do we Christians believe? Let's see. Here we go again. A worldwide flood just a few thousand years ago, by the way, not millions of years ago, caused the extinction of most of the dinosaurs. Now, what's interesting about that is, which one of those three theories explains dinosaur biological material? Asteroids that occurred millions of years ago, volcanic eruptions that occurred millions of years ago, or a worldwide flood that only occurred a few thousand years ago? I know which one I'd pick. So, what does the fossil, dino, and strata data we studied seem to suggest? Well, it does suggest, first of all, if you find a shoe print, not just a footprint, a shoe print, a modern shoe print standing on a trilobite, there goes the geologic column. If you have pictures, hieroglyphs, sculptures, figurines, etc., of dinosaurs from people a few thousand years ago that have never been able to see a dinosaur because they died 65 million years ago. If you have strata that goes a mile high and there's sea creatures on the top of the strata and throughout the strata, by the way. Polystrate fossils, okay? The case is overwhelming. So, does it seem like today that even if an evolutionist came across a smoking gun which proves a young Earth, would he make his findings known to the world? No, he wouldn't. He couldn't. He'd be crucified by his peers. And that's the truth. Now, at least though, watch this, at least now people are talking about it.
Hey guys, hope you're having a great day. Thank you so much for watching Beyond the Science. It's Mikey Chen. When we think of dinosaurs and humans, we never associate them with each other because they supposedly belong to completely different time periods. Dinosaurs were prehistoric reptiles that appeared during the Middle to Late Triassic period of the Mesozoic era, which is around 230 million years ago. They were members of a subclass of reptiles that included birds and crocodiles and got their name from the ancient Greek word dinos, meaning terrible, and sauros, which means lizard or reptile. Dinosaurs first sparked people's curiosities in the 1820s when scientists found huge bones of an unknown reptile in the English countryside. Ever since then, dinosaurs have been favorites of children and adults, probably because they're extinct and can no longer eat us. Their sheer size and uniqueness have inspired many documentaries, movies, and stories alike. Humans, on the other hand, according to scientists, are relatively new to Earth compared to the large lizards. While our ancestors have been around for about 6 million years, modern humans evolved about 200,000 years ago. That means that humans and dinosaurs never coexisted, much less interacted with each other, right? And although many people believe that it's impossible for humans and dinosaurs to have coexisted, there has been clues from fossils, paintings, ancient sculptures, and more that tells a slightly different story, implying that humans did in fact interact with these ginormous lizards. I know this is a super controversial topic, but it's also really interesting. So here are some clues for the coexistence of humans and dinosaurs. Hear it out and make your own decision. One of these clues was found in May of 2012 when the brow horn of a triceratops was excavated in Dawson County, Montana, that was dated to around 33,500 years ago.
Only
Triceratops, a name that
33,500
means
years.
three-horned face, is believed to have first appeared during the Cretaceous period around 68 million years ago and became extinct after around 2 million years. The Triceratops brow horn found in Montana was stored at the Glendive Dinosaur and Fossil Museum.
Okay, so anyway, he's got some neat stuff, and you should go watch it. And the evidence keeps mounting up that man was around with the dinosaurs. The only thing that would explain it, the only theory that we've come up with so far, the volcanic theory doesn't do it, the asteroid theory doesn't do it, but a worldwide flood does. And worldwide flood is recorded in history by every ancient civilization. 50% of their samples had biological materials. You can't deny these facts anymore, folks. But they'll keep trying to. But anyway, enough said. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for listening if you did. Comment below. I'll do my best to answer. Thanks.